You mentioned Jason Verbelli before there, buddy. I'm a sort of hit off a friendship with him because somebody who was watching us, and then he said something about he was basically chastising me for electrical engineering and not believing all the the RCA is shutting this down, and we can have debates about it. We can have debates about Tesla and stuff like that, but he was fairly adamant. So I really pissed him off. But Jason Verbelli,
that's the dollar narrative.
Well, there you go. But Jason
Probably. Sounds like it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Jason was in the the same group, but he liked what I had to say because my answers were basically, it doesn't really matter what you think. Reality is what it is. If you can prove a point and then repeat it, and I was trying to basically describe the scientific method in a nutshell, right? Like, you got to really, repeat those. You got to really do these tests, do the experiment. Then maybe you'll find a flaw in the numbers, at least even, an anomaly, which begs further investigation. And that's, how you discover things.
This is a very limited, this is kind of the crux of kind of what we're talking about. And it's nice because we have kind of spectral views on it, but it's a very limited, initial condition situation, Well, so there's a limited set of things that you can prove scientifically.
And you have
they can imply bigger things.
You have to look at all the ways things have been discovered throughout history before you can say what is the scientific method.
Well, no, I can't. Here we go again. The scientific method is really very, very particular. Welcome to the September 18th edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have Dave, Jim, Robert, Buddy, Richard, and Cameron. We got into a great debate as to the essence of science and the difference between philosophical paradigms and objective reality. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's basically saying, does my calculations agree with the experiment or agree with reality? Can I repeat this? And
somebody said that once. That doesn't make it a truth.
Well, it is the basis of basically saying, that's why you can't prove in science. You can only disprove. You have to basically, you cannot say this is the way it is. You can only say this is the way it isn't because.
No, you can prove that.
No,
but
prove things mathematically.
Well, yes, that's a bit different. The mathematical proof is different than a scientific proof.
Well, for instance, astronomy is an interesting example.
That's basically where it comes up to, yeah.
Where you can discover things by exploring and seeing them and recording them and noticing patterns, and that's a kind of science, even though in that context there aren't really any experiments you can do.
Well, and
science is also involves, like just classifying all the different species and genera. That's science.
Well, that's more descriptive science. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's the basis of Hermeticism and a bunch of other things, and I'm cool with that, really. But the actual discovering something that works or doesn't work, you have to go, okay, I'm going to do my calculations, and then I'm going to see if it works exactly as it should. And then I could say, okay, well, this generally describes this, and I can get more particular. But at the end of the day, I can't say exactly that this proves that because there could always come across a better way of explaining it. And that's what I meant by you can only falsify. You can show where things are wrong. And this example of falsification is where we're ending up having challenges to like the Big Bang Theory and these large stories that are made to hang things on and give people perception.
Well, those are fun.
Well,
into falsifying those.
In some sense, you're talking about models.
I am.
And I would say rather than talking about whether you're proving or disproving a model, I think you have competing models with pro and con evidence. And what you have is what you really have is sort of the model that seems most worth pursuing to you at any given moment.
Well, that could be made an argument, but really what it boils down to, though, is the essence of science is if it fails even once, it's inherently wrong, and that's the issue that we have is basically knowing what falsification is, and astronomers obviously have to say, well, in this one thing, there's an exception. Here's an ad hoc rule that we'll throw in there.
But it's often perspective.
Of course. But if we want to be truly scientific,
so you're throwing a Boolean at something that's spectral.
I mean, I'd rather think in terms of evolving models.
Well, that's philosophy, though, and I'm cool with that. That's scientific philosophy or physics.
It's a philosophy of science.
Well, that's physics by definition.
You've got a different philosophy of science, so that's fine.
No.
There's no way I can settle it.
No, there is. That's the whole point of science, is to basically go, here's a finite rule, and you can't...
Like what? Like what, for instance? Give me one.
Give you one?
Just one.
Just one, okay. Just off the top of my head.
Please.
For example, the relationship between magnetism and electricity. And if now we knew that there was a relationship there, Faraday knew it, he could move things, he could feel it, but he didn't understand until a certain point when he recognized that a moving magnetic field will actually create an electric charge.
You're naming something that you're measuring. You're measuring some type of activity with magnetism, but it's a measurement. Right?
It's a pattern and a regularity in nature. That's what science is. Science is patterns and regularities in nature. So to define what science is, you have to understand that science is the history of patterns and regularities in nature. And it's based on faith. Science is faith. And I'll tell you how science is.
Faith and regularity? Faith and regularity.
I'm just telling you right now, I don't agree with anything you guys are saying.
I agree with that.
But go ahead.
This last part, last sentence here. Faith, science is the faith that the future will repeat the past. That's it. That's what science is. It's the faith that the future will repeat the past.
This is the cornerstone.
It has to do with patterns, regularities.
Okay, in that general sense, the repetition or the ability to replicate an experiment, I agree with. In that general essence, I can agree with that. But in the Feynman, the very straight, Richard Feynman did the 1 minute thing. It doesn't matter what their name is. If it doesn't agree with the experiment, it's wrong. And that is the crux of science in a very straight nutshell. Basically, you have to be able to not have it falsified. It has to be able to withstand falsification.
There's a line of, like, if you're going to do a paper and do something formal in academia, the line is this: unbroken chain of comparison. That's the structure that you make. If you have A, B, C, if you go all the way to Z, and then 500 links in the chain, they all have to have an unbroken line of comparison, right? This is how it's done, right? But once you change your perspective on it, on one of those points, long chains are very difficult to hold up. Well, you give 2 points, 3 points, Occam's razor, of course,
Of course. But I think
but a lot of this has to do with a fixed perspective that there's quite a bit of herd mind going on.
Well, of course,
that they won't move, as we know, right?
But what you're saying makes sense. But I would try to put it in a different way. By changing your perspective, it changes the questions you can ask, and ask.
I'll give you a thought experiment. Here's a thought experiment. You take two isolated groups of people, but just basically, however you want to say it, they're basically the same group of people, say 100 people, and you separate them, and they live independently, right? And they're exposed to all these different things that the world is, and they come up with ideas about them, right? What would be your guess that they would have much similarity between the two of them.
In philosophy or application of science?
In observation, in science, quote unquote, scientific observation, and models.
What they can prove or disprove would be the same scientifically. What they came up with for a model to explain it might be different.
They would measure things. Say they had all the same measurement instruments, but they didn't know they didn't know the names of things.
No, I'm not even debating that.
They had to make up the names of them. It's like I would muse on that a little bit if
Well, no.
Because to me, it's pretty obvious that they would be highly disparate.
See, and I don't see that at all. I see that certain things that they could have different philosophies or even quote unquote different faiths regarding it. But if they started studying, for example, the effect of gravity, they would realize no matter how large the object is, it falls at the same rate. This is an inherent truth about gravity. It's not something, it's immutable. Now, the philosophy behind what causes gravity might be different.
And it took us thousands of years to learn that. I mean,
yeah, it's little things.
Some disparate group isn't going to come up on it in some short time.
Well, no,
that's
but
also only in atmosphere and not our current gravity.
No, it's just no matter where it is, I'm on the moon or on Mars.
And just the name itself has with another name, it has a different thing.
Well, sure, the solar wind implies a wind, for example, but we recognize it as an electric current. That's a change in philosophy, but it doesn't change the properties of the field.
In your mind ends up being that just because of that name.
Yes, what we're getting into is the philosophy behind, but it doesn't change the foundational things that we can prove or disprove.
You're presenting something you're presenting an objective universe that I say is inherently subjective.
And I totally disagree. There is definitely objective reality that all of science is based on. No, well, we're building it. This is what a computer does. I mean, it's objectively real.
Well, this is the argument that this is nice to have a little clarity.
I can have the philosophical debate behind it. I really can, but I can't deny certain things. I mean, if you understand the relationships between just the way that water flows through pipes. I mean, that's simple example. Like, doesn't require anything fancier than 2,000 years of history type of thing. But these rules of how pressure works and how things will work and how much pressure you could add to a pipe before it explodes, determining the type of material is being used. These are things you can work out if you have enough variables. This is reality, basically. But now, why? If you think the water is the essence of God, you might treat it differently. Just like as I would have to debate that way back when.
You don't have to take the jump into any type of deity.
Well, no, I was just using that as an example. The divinity
but I hear the implication of what you're saying.
What do you think I'm implying?
You're saying it's an objective universe, and I'm saying it's a subjective universe.
We can infer whatever, but only when our beliefs contrary to reality will we learn again then. Because people can think a bunch of other things, but when we discover that it's not true, for example, it crashes into Mars or the rocket explodes, we have to go back and see what
How do you observe it?
How do we observe what?
The crashing into whatever what you're positing. It's an observation.
Well, it's your philosophy conflicting with the reality of the situation. The reality is you didn't do it right. Whoever it was that crashed into the planet, I guess.
No. Okay, I don't understand the direction you're going with.
I'm saying that no matter. Go ahead, buddy. Sorry, you've been yakking.
I think it can be both subjective and objective. The observer is the observed. So I think there's definitely an inside and out. There's an interior and an exterior to all of it. I mean, personally, that's the way I look at it.
Well, I would like to think that we can have our own personal journeys, and I'm not in any way trying to say you can't. And I think that each one of us is sort of building our own constructive philosophy of the universe as we go along, and I recognize that. But when reality, when force equals mass times acceleration, you could think, just like in a cartoon, getting hit with a car won't really hurt you. because the cartoon dog survived the hit and he laughed it off and he went chasing the Roadrunner. That's fine. But in reality, you're gonna die getting hit with a car going 60 miles an hour. You know, this is the force equals mass times acceleration. You do the force in newtons on exactly how much it's going to hit you, and you're going to realize your body cannot take that stress. And this is what it is. I mean, the reality is different than your philosophy. I appreciate that, but it doesn't matter when the rules apply, you know, like when it actually happens.
I'm not going that direction.
Well, obviously.
Okay. So,
yeah,
changing the subject a little bit.
Sure. Okay.
Did you guys hear the new big news this morning?
What?
Which one?
Elon Musk's new announcement.
The new space program, sending up a civilian.
Yeah, the first private citizen. It was announced this morning. The first private citizen is going to be going up into space through Elon Musk's SpaceX, and this is the fun part. I listened to the whole thing. It was like an hour and a half, but the fun part is he doesn't want to go up alone. It seems like I think the guy is Asian, and he's like, when he was talking, he's like, you know what? I don't like to be lonely, so I'm gonna pick 5 or 6 artists to come up there with me and go to the moon. And this is going to happen in 2023. By artists, I mean, like, yeah, they're going to go to the moon and out into space. I don't know if they're going to land. They're going to go out to the moon.
My goodness.
And he's talking about his idea of artists. He mentioned, I really like Michael Jackson. I really like this person, that person. So now the guy said, I'm going to be contacting the people that I want to come up with me. So you better answer. Yeah, he's like, you better answer Terrence my call. When I call you, you better say yes. He said, you're going to want to come.
No.
I sent it to Terrence first thing in the morning. I'm like, here's your opportunity.
Did you tell Terrence?
Yeah, first thing in the morning.
Awesome. The psychological effects of being in a confined space like that is something that people don't really dwell on. Like, I am very surprised that the first 3 men that went to the moon, given even if you have conspiracy theories, just being locked into something the size of a car and putting that car out on the ground and just sitting there with me, you, and a bunch of other people, or these 5 artists in one little box, would result in the deaths of 4 of the 5 of them because they'll kill each other. I mean, it takes a lot of effort. Human beings are not meant to do this very well. They're not, especially free-range humans, I guess. I mean, they probably the people in the astronaut program went through a lot of psychological training so that they didn't end up murdering each other. So I mean, look at what's happening right now. The person who might have drilled a hole in the space station just to get home. I want to go home. Wow. You know, that kind of blows my mind just thinking about it. So,
who said that was the reason?
There's been a lot of talk on whether or not that hole looks like it was intentionally drilled. It wasn't so.
Well, to jump from that to say it was because somebody wanted to go home.
Well, that was part of the article, so I
think we could falsify that.
You should up your ratings, the level.
It reminds me of Ex Machina. If you guys have seen that movie, Ex Machina, it's a really good movie, but it's about artificial intelligence, and this guy is pretty much like the guy who runs Microsoft, and he's coming up with artificial intelligence, and this robot or this AI doll scratches her way out of each and every room. And then eventually she's so intelligent that she convinces the guy to come in, and then she kills him so she can be free. You know, whenever you put someone or something confined like that, I think what Neil is saying here is that we go crazy sometimes and we'll dig a hole, even though it's going to kill us. We'll dig a hole to get out of it.
Well, it was just an insinuation by the article. It doesn't. It just because it probably couldn't have been an accident, so they were just coming up with reasons. But
So real quick about the Tesla thing.
Please.
So I put the question out there to the Facebook family. Who do you guys think of the artists? Who do you think would actually go out there? Who do you think this guy's going to pick? And there's currently a couple of things going on simultaneously in culture. There's a new movie coming out called A Star is Born with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. So that's coming out at the same time. And there's also another movie where they go to the moon, and that's coming out, and that's starring Ryan Gosling. So you just look at things simultaneously going on in culture at the same time. And
what are they doing? What are they doing with this? I mean, there's a whole, he's a cultural, to me, tool,
Yeah.
This whole thing, it's like, oh, he's this grand, look how brilliant he is. He created this whole thing. He's ultimately funded by people who are, he's kind of a puppet.
Yeah. Right? Millions and millions. I think, I don't know the exact amount of millions, but I heard it was in the $90-something million.
Right.
Was already
but he's just the face of a large, collective that ultimately is manipulating culture. Right.
Okay. Well, think of Iron Man. When you think of Elon Musk, you're supposed to. Everyone wants you to liken him to Iron Man.
Right.
That's
exactly.
what culture's telling you to think. They're telling you, oh, he's
but that's not really what's the thing. That's not
right.
the mechanism. Right.
So we're defining culture as what our programmers are presenting to us.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
So you don't have any space for a surviving folk culture.
For your own, for the natural culture that would happen without it.
They're going to tell you what the narrative is, and you should think this way. And then
it's kind of like got a lottery aspect to it, the game of the lottery, how that plays with everyone's minds. But it's, you get to go to space, and it's, and then.
Can you imagine that? So I wrote, what about Tom DeLonge, Blink 182?
Yeah.
People were like, no, he's not even that good of an artist. They wouldn't invite him.
Okay. He's doing the same thing. He's kind of on the same path. Yeah, very bizarre.
And what's weird, how this all started is this, yesterday I felt really strange, and I have everybody has ESP to any type of certain degree or level, spidey senses, and I put out on Facebook yesterday that I was feeling this way, especially yesterday, and Aline McCusick contacted me and said she was feeling this way too, about something happening possibly today.
Wow, okay.
Really strange, and I invited her on the show. She never really
It's a lot of mixing around. The sun thing has really got me kind of like, why would they do this thing, with the FBI stuff? And
yep. Heather posted something yesterday that was really good about, I think it was along the lines of astrology, that was explaining something about some cycles we were in currently. I thought that was good yesterday.
So what do you think, Neil? What should we talk about?
I don't know. I would go through it scientifically, but I don't want to be attacked. Zing!
Yeah,
right there.
Just have a little stronger
I know,
constitution.
Well, as soon as you start talking, Neil, you won't be able to prove it. So
no, I won't.
There's no proof anyway.
No proof anyway. No.
The one that continues to come up is this phenomena versus the noumena, and it's like the thing as it is, because, and this is the thing that Eugene was bringing up, but it's that one. It's a great concept, because there is the idea of the thing as it is that we can't, that is beyond our senses. The entire nature of the thing as it is versus what we can sense of the thing.
As far as reality and everything.
Yeah, well, whatever it is, you take any, you can say, take a closed system where there's something in a box, right?
I don't believe in closed systems.
No, I know, but I mean, even with the scientific, even with the scientific method, it exists, right? So there's in a closed system, there's a thing in the box, right? And we can sense these things. We can make all these measurements, and we can feel, we can see, we can touch. But all of those are you can make a pretty strong argument. All of those measurements are pretty limited compared to what the thing as it is, all the characteristics of the thing.
True, and we can't see the majority of them. I mean, the majority of everything is based off of fields that are composing the nodes and allowing them to continue their dance. So, and that's unfortunately what we can't see, and we can't even detect it. And some of our detectors can detect some of it, but even then, we're just looking at data and then statistics. Statistics are, we know about that.
Yeah, and Neil, don't take this personally, because it's more of a kind of a philosophical angle that I'm finding strong these days, as you can hear in my approach, right? But there's quite a bit of arrogance as to, well, this is what it is, and this is pervasive throughout the academia. This is what it is, and we know, and we you know, how dare you question it? And it's like because of what I just mentioned.
If you're debating on philosophical issues, then you're absolutely right to say things that what you just said is wrong. You're absolutely right.
They don't separate. They're not necessarily.
They're not separating. You're absolutely right. But what I'm talking about is specific to the actual experimentation of science. That is all I'm talking about. The inference afterwards is problematic, and you're supposed to be able to build up and recognize what is fundamentally real. And we're having like we can have a debate on the reality of electromagnetic forces, and getting down to perhaps what is magnetism, those type of questions. You can start entering into a philosophical debate down below or even up high, but in the, say, astrophysics realm. And this is the interpretation of reality. But there are certain things that are just real.
Boxes to separate something that I believe that they're inherently tied at the hip.
And I obviously don't see it that way. I see very clearly that
philosophy and science. Perception is science.
Physics is the philosophy of science by definition. But you actually are attributing. I mean, this is what Newton's first work was on that whole thing. But the principles of philosophy basically is called physics, and this ends up being something that we can. The certain rules that he worked out there that he took from other aspects and actually codified became the foundation of where we are going today, and they are. And I can admit that, calling something the universal law of gravitation, he recognized very clearly that he said, I frame no hypothesis. I don't know what causes this. It doesn't stop other people after him from mistaking this and then going off into conjecture and then making mistakes and then applying it incorrectly and yada, yada, yada. We end up with, something other than reality. But when it gets right down to certain things, like I know that if something has a capacitance here, it can store this much energy, and I know that what that means. That's a physical understanding of the principles of the electrical field, not necessarily to be interpreted. You can interpret what is electricity, but you can't interpret, or what is, you can't determine, what is force. We know what force is, and we measure it in this way, and so forth, and that type of thing. But it allows us to move forward in science, but we can still interpret with afterwards.
I think it might limit us from moving forward.
Sometimes when it makes a mistake, like I mentioned before, the universal law of gravitation, applying something universally when it may not be universal, maybe it only applies to things on Earth. That's interesting. That's a good problem, and it does look like it might have limited us. And you're right. But it wasn't it wasn't Newton's fault. Newton was very clear that he said, no, I have no idea what causes this. You guys can guess that. He just he was like, I frame no hypothesis.
Right.
This is what we're doing right here. Is we're taking laws that we would generally find immutable, electrically speaking, and we're applying them to other aspects where they didn't normally apply to. And we're challenging the Newtonian boys and girls, which had became the Einsteinian boys and girls. Now, we're not really challenging Newton, except maybe on that whole universal law, but that's, again, not his fault. And then we're really challenging Eddington and Einstein is who we're really challenging.
I want to know what happened at the Royal Academy.
Every day.
Yeah.
Which part?
That whole because he was kind of put up on a pedestal by them. You know. Yeah,
and he didn't like it very much.
So was the guy who invented the Big Bang. They said that dude, no one even knows the guy's name that invented the Big Bang, but it was fact immediately as soon as it came out from the Royal Institution.
Actually, the latest book I downloaded from Audible is the story of the formation of the Royal Society and everything. So
it's interesting what happened back then, and it's not really part of I'm catching up on like who the players were, and it's really pretty fascinating what was going on back then.
I'd say they'd be closer to Wall and Dave and the EU people than to the current scientific establishment. I mean, they were private. Well, I mean, they were upper class and all, but they were just private citizens with an interest in learning, figuring things out.
Is there anybody in the electric universe in our crew that has been either accepted by the Royal Society or acknowledged in any manner? Maybe Rupert Sheldrake or someone?
Definitely not him, but Pollock, Dr. Gerald Pollock certainly has been shared the stage with people from the Royal Fellows Society, I'm sure.
Ooh.
Yeah.
His work is almost not even considered electric. I mean, it's just he's working in a very small field, and then he begins to apply it to the atmosphere. But once you start going beyond that, that's when, astrophysicists are like, whoa, 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 whoa. But, challenge meteorology, it's not really going to hurt him that much.
Right.
It's who your enemy is, right?
Yeah.